Hello and welcome to A Tippling Philosopher with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. Now, I know, goodness knows, some of you might be jumping onto this or seeing this who are really interested in the Ukraine war and all my videos I've been doing on that. This is not that. This is getting back to my roots, which is philosophy and the philosophy of religion. And I'm really excited to talk to my friend Hanney Seylim, who is a fellow YouTuber in the same kind of philosophy of religion area as myself. And in fact, I've been on his channel a number of times. We're going through a series to talk about my recent book, which is, for those who want to know, I love a spam opportunity, 30 Arguments Against the Existence of God, Heaven, Hell, Satan, and Divine Design. So that was my most recent book. And I'm serializing that on Hanney's channel, which I'll show you a bit later. And I just thought what a great opportunity it would be for us both to get together again if he could come onto my channel and talk about his life, his experiences, what he's doing, why he's doing it, and what he believes and why he believes it. So without further ado, that's a lot of preamble. Hanney, welcome to the channel.
Finally, thanks very much. I'm very honored to be with you today on your channel.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Really, well, I thought I'd return a favor, and of course, you know, you can put this up on your channel when you want as well. So, you are well. First of all, let us know a little bit about you. Where do you live? I mean, this is going out at a weird time because no one in America is going to be awake, and it's going out at a weird time for particular reasons. So, tell me about yourself a little bit.
Well, it's 9 p.m. here in Melbourne, Australia, where I live at the moment. So it's an okay time, but I myself very accustomed to weird broadcasting because we are in the ass of the world. So I have to work around where the world is awake. So I broadcast both Arabic and English. I actually started in broadcasting in Arabic because that was my emphasis. It's the area that has the most need for science and information and philosophy, because they pretty much, almost like Europe, some 300, 400 years ago, when it comes to theology dominating the realm. So I started streaming about 2 years ago, started a critical faculty channel, was trying to really, I'm an atheist. I'm going to get this out there immediately. But my concern was the amount of ignorance that is sort of very, very dominating the Arabic and the Middle Eastern world. The information on science and philosophy is almost non-existent. They think evolution is over in Europe, and that Darwin is sort of raised the white flag a century ago, and it's everybody's going by ID for some reason.
ID being intelligent design, yeah, absolutely.
Design, yeah.
And the idea that, and it's a kind of an unfalsifiable idea that God has designed the universe, and we can see evidence of design, except this evidence of design looks exactly like naturalistic evolution, and therefore it's very difficult to actually prove that there is intelligent design.
Yeah,
that looks
they still put some science in, like people like Michael Behe and C. Meyer, they're trying to, the irreducible complexity, where there's they find something and say that's so complex, and that's how it was to start with, and therefore it must be designed. But then people try to no, that actually has evolved as well from simpler forms. The mouse trap is a Michael Behe kind of favorite example of the parts are too complex to exist together to form the function of a mousetrap, and each of them, they cannot just be accumulated over time to give you that final mousetrap. But then I've heard a couple of biologists sort of argue that with them and saying, actually each item could have actually evolved independently and eventually comes to that, and that's quite understood in evolution, not a problem at all.
Well, yeah, and this is where you get onto conversations of things like bacterial flagellums and the eye, and whether they are able to be, they are the products of evolution, or whether they are too complex and you can't see component parts. But then you look at photosensitive cells just in general, and the fact that there's there are many different ways to the same place in terms of evolution, and that the eye, for example, there are many different eyes that have evolved in many different ways. And so if you had an intelligent designer, you'd think, well, here's a really good eye, and therefore, but actually there's just lots of iterations of eyes, and some work better than others, and others are. It looks very much like eyes are evolved to the environment they are being used in, which is, evolution.
Yeah. Apart from ours, because our retina that's back to front is more suited to being in water. It actually is more understood if you're in water, which gives hint to our ancestors. I don't know if you've noticed my brand, my symbol is the Darwin's fish. The fish with yeah. So that's here as a hint of one of our grandfathers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my last video I did with you was about the dysteleological arguments. So these are arguments from poor design. And in fact, the human eye is an example of poor design. It's very susceptible to certain issues and things. And I don't want to get into that now, but if you had a perfect designer, you would not expect, death at childbirth. You would not expect, you would not expect eyes like these. You would not expect to be able to choke very easily when you're eating. All these kind of things, appendicitis, they make sense under naturalistic evolution and scientific naturalism. They don't make sense under a perfect God creating perfectly.
Indeed, absolutely.
So, okay, well, let's rewind a little bit back to yourself. You've got a weird accent. Explain that one to us.
It's very mixed up. If you had me after a couple of pints, it's pretty Irish, blood Irish. But then it's mixed with a bit of Aussie. I'm half Egyptian. My father is Egyptian. As a matter of fact, you'd be pleasantly surprised. We have been discussing your book on Clubhouse, which is an application. It's an audio only in Arabic, and I've had probably about 6,000 or 8,000 people turning up to these lectures, and I'm going through your entire book one by one, each argument.
Oh, mate, I love you. You're awesome. No, thank you. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And well, so we're going to come on to how well received or the different audience and Arabic audiences in a second. So but let's just unpick a little bit so you've got an Egyptian dad and you've got an Irish mum. Is that correct? So does that mean that you have an Islamic father and a Catholic mother? How did that work when you were growing up?
In a way, because my father was always an atheist. I opened my eyes. He wasn't a believer. And I sort of grew up between the two countries, but I spent a lot of my childhood in Egypt. The mom was Catholic Christian, but really never liked the Bible, and she was more into New Age, spiritualistic stuff. So she was easy. Both of them, my father is dead now, but both of them are atheists, by the time I was done with them. And my sister also sort of died, unfortunately, quite young with cancer. My only sister, and she was a couple of years younger than me, and she was just kind of deist at best. So I managed to sort of convince them later on in life.
Seriously, so was that something that you wanted to do? Was that something you just ended up doing by osmosis?
Oh, well, I was always interested in arguing a point. I think it's part of my personality. Even when I was a young person, I was on the debate team. I always wanted to convince people of my point of view. I wanted to understand how things really work. And that's why I've become an atheist at a very young age. I got into Christianity and Islam, both of them, because I was allowed to. We didn't have any restrictions in the household. I sort of became a Muslim for about a year and a half.
Really? How old were you at that time?
I was about 16, and I think I was being rebellious against my dad because my dad was an atheist, and this is the age where you take your dad on.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
I know it all. You think you know it all, dads, but I've got a better version. So I think out of spite, I became a Muslim, and then I realized, shit, he's right all along.
Yeah. So okay, well, let's unpick that. So where you became a bit of a Muslim at that age? I say a bit because I don't want to be disrespectful, but that age.
No, I completely.
I hear like people like Canadian Catholic, who's another YouTuber, and he says, I used to be an atheist, and then I realized it was all wrong and became this Catholic. And you're like, Yeah, but when you used to be an atheist, you were 17 years old. I didn't know my arse from my elbow at the age of 17. So I could not have made claims to any politics or religion or any kind of philosophical position with any kind of certitude or meaningful rationality at that age.
Yeah.
I was just too young. So that's why I say when you were 16, you were kind of a Muslim, but then rejected it. What led you to reject it particularly?
Oh, I got into it. I read the bloody thing. That's the difference. I think this is the difference. I think once you start reading, really, whatever holy text you're reading, and you get into it, and if you happen to be interested in other things in life, like science, and just I was very interested in from a very young age, you quickly find lots of holes. Morality issues, all sort of issues, and being born to a sort of a different household with a different type of culture and tradition, where women are quite equal. The European lifestyle, and then you compare it to the Egyptian lifestyle, you see the deprived Egyptian youth from practicing little things like actually falling in love for the first time or having a first kiss and things like that.
Interesting.
These are taboos back home.
So are you saying that you rejected? Well, it was. There were two ways that you were rejecting that belief. There was partly reading the source text, but also your cultural, social life not being. The idea that hey, this is growing up and these are things I want to do, and this worldview is stopping me from doing that, and there doesn't seem to be anything inherently wrong with this, therefore there must be something inherently wrong with that. Is that fair?
Very true. And I was kind of fish out of water, because once it was a certain families who live in Egypt with sort of mixed backgrounds and almost like living in compound westernized lifestyle in certain secluded areas in Cairo. So you live sort of a European lifestyle anyway. So I had a girlfriend, all that sort of stuff, which is things you won't be allowed to have if you're just an Egyptian practicing Muslim. So I always wanted my freedom anyway. But I got into the text just to see, and I got really into it. I was praying 5 times a day. I got into it. I'm always a firm believer. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it right. So
Yeah.
I got into religion just to find out, well, what is the fuss is all about? Is there really a spiritual thing? But I was shocked. I was actually, most of the time I was reading some of the text with my mouth open, going, what was he on?
In what way? Oh, right. Yeah.
From the creation story, the piece of dirt, and form Adam and Eve, original sin that didn't make any sense. It sounds like a sit-up to me. A lot of things didn't make sense. The science didn't sort of match a lot of the claims, and even on morality. Let's say, okay, well, do you know what? Nothing is literal. It's just all symbolic. He's talking to ancient people, and he's telling them wisdom in forms of stories. So hopefully morality then is something to learn. There must be some good moral lessons and stories in there. But then you read them and you look at the rape, right-hand possession in Islam, where if you raid another village near you, you're allowed to take all the women for yourself and as 6 slaves. What is that? Well, I mean, we know with the Geneva Convention we've done better as human species over God. It's so simple.
So I remember reading the Quran. In fact, I wrote quite heavily on it at the time, and I, in fact, lectured on it or gave public talks. I wouldn't say lectured. I gave public talks at universities and whatnot on Islam and violence. Now, I'm a really liberal philosopher and politically liberal person, but what I was saying was quite damning against Islam, not against Muslims, but against Islam being naturally a violent religion because of what the core texts say. And the core text is the Quran, and then you have the Hadith, which are even worse. But okay, let's say the Hadith are these they're the sayings of Muhammad that were written later, right? So if you want to be, you can forget them and just be a little bit liberal about those and just say, okay, that we don't have as great provenance for them, but let's take the Quran as the word of God. dictated in by the Archangel Gabriel over a 22-year period to the Prophet Muhammad, and this was, literally true, and it's transcribed perfectly, and all this kind of stuff. Right? If that's what you believe, then it looks like there's some pretty violent stuff in there, and the violent stuff is the later stuff. There's this thing, the theory of abrogation, or NASC, I think, which is the idea that, okay, we've got contradictions here. We've got religion of peace, okay, and then we've got some really violent stuff here, and they seem to be entirely contradictory. How do we get around this? How do we harmonize these? And the best theory is this theory of abrogation, which is the later stuff trumps the earlier stuff, because the later stuff was more recent and more like accurate, and what Muhammad or the Archangel Gabriel or whatever it trumps the earlier stuff. But the later stuff is when Muhammad had become a militaristic leader and was going around campaigning and killing other people and so on and so forth. So the later stuff is more violent. But if the later stuff trumps the earlier stuff, then this religion of peace idea is trumped by the violence, and this is a problem. And I think it's a problem that's baked into the Quran, and therefore the theology of the religion, and so that's a problem.
Yeah, well, the abrogation is actually established and found in the Quran. There is a verse that talks about abrogation, and if God make you to forget or neglect a certain verse, He will come with a better one. It's like you said that, says that in the Quran. The Quran was revealed over 23 years.
23,
yeah. Muhammad had the Quran revealed to him inside a cave called Cave Hira in Saudi Arabia. He was at the age of 40. And for 23 years, the revelation, and there has some discontinuation in between. Once when a Christian priest, who used to be a cousin of his wife, died. And suddenly the revelation stopped for some time. That's a hint, hint, wink, wink. The second time is when he suspected his beloved wife Aisha, the young one, the one who married when he was 53 and she was 9, that she was having an affair with somebody else. And revelation stopped, and the next verse came was one to say, well, Aisha is actually innocent all along. So imagine that the last message to humanity. How is this? And this is, they try to have you convinced that this Quran is written before all humanity were created.
And so much of it seems to be like post hoc rationalization or post hoc codification of what Muhammad. So Muhammad had some issues like, oh, what do I do here? I'm going to go and kill these guys, and then or something like I'm really simplifying, and then suddenly he gets a revelation that codifies exactly what he's done. It's like, oh, that's really coincidental. It's this sort of very, very sort of political and social.
I'll give you a prime example, something that's quite embarrassing here. In the Arabic tradition, pre-Islam, when you raid another village, you're not allowed to take women who are married. Because not for human rights, again, it's very much like the Old Testament. It's because it's the possession of the man. You're actually, you respect your fellow man even, but there's a bit of nobility there. It's like you don't kick somebody when they're already sort of on the ground by taking even their wife, type of thing. But nothing to do with the wife as a separate human being. But then, and all the companions of the Prophet said, oh, our traditions, we can't do that. A revelation comes in the Quran that gives license to the Muslim warriors to take these women as a license. So actually morality has gone backward, literally. So this Arabic tradition at least had something, even though it's for the wrong reason, but at least the outcome, the woman is not going to be raped, and it doesn't matter what the reason is, but the outcome is going to remain the same. But for a revelation to come and take morality, a century back or a couple of centuries back, that tells me there is something very wrong. And that's on the back of Muhammad was trying to convince them, you can take these women. And lo and behold, a revelation comes and, sets the record straight. How convenient.
Yeah, and it was funny when I was giving talks about Islam and violence and saying that actually it isn't a religion of peace, and it's not because, and here are the verses, and here is how to interpret them in the Quran. I had a lot of pushback from fellow liberals who were like, you can't attack Islam, you are being Islamophobic. And I'm like, but you didn't have a problem when I was attacking Christianity. I've literally done this for 10 years with Christianity, and now I'm doing it with Islam. You're suddenly having a go at me
Yeah.
because Muslims in certain countries are quite oppressed, as in like in America, there's people of prejudice against them. So there's this idea that, okay, let's not feed into this Islamophobia. And so I did have these big debates with myself about, well, actually, is what I'm saying, even though it's true, in my opinion, it might be counterproductive to present further reason to be prejudiced against Muslims, or at least Islam, and thus Muslims. And so I had these internal debates, and I stopped writing and saying so much publicly against Islam, because I was just kind of conflicted about what's the ultimate goal of what I'm doing here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it reminds me of that infamous conversation with Ben Affleck and Sam Harris on Bill Maher. Islam is the mother lode of ideas, bad ideas, and Ben Affleck then told him, "Oh, it's almost like you're saying a filthy Jew," and Sam Harris was trying to explain to him, "No, I am criticizing the idea here. I separate the people." But people don't get that. Remember, Islam is supposed to be for the underprivileged and the colored. We're people of color. And if you want to be seen, if you're a liberal in the United States and you want to be seen saying the right thing, and you're with human rights, and suddenly you have that reverse situation where you say, well, that's Man Friday of Robinson Crusoe. That's the white man trying to dominate here. No, I'm not going to allow you to do so by criticizing a wrong idea happened to be held by certain people who happen to dwell in the Middle East, and that's happened to be their kind of skin color. It's immaterial and it's irrelevant.
Mm. I think half the problem, you talked about, Islam means submission, right? And I think as soon as when you talk about the morality of the Quran, and Dan Barker talks about this, spam again. Dan Barker wrote the foreword to my last book, so yip-de-doo.
We're gonna have a conversation with him in November, 3 of us.
Yes, so the 3 of us are going to be talking. So that's really exciting. So yeah, good link there. So he talks about in Mere Morality, his book, about how the Bible is so predominantly about this relationship with God, but not the relationship of humans to other humans, and how to do morality as a species or as a community, as a society. And he talks about morality just appears to be doing whatever God says and being obedient to God. And it's all about putting this one thing in the front and center of your life and being obedient. Well, the Quran, like Islam, literally means submission. So when you talk about the morality of the Quran, it appears that that's entirely what the morality of the Quran is all about, which is all about submitting to God and being good to God.
Yeah, but you see, they're trying to have you fooled these days now, and the word submission it no longer sort of attach itself to slavery. It's more to do with, when you practice Buddhism and you lose yourself to the infinite. And it's that kind of surrender. It's more of the surrender of the soul and of your desires, and that's obviously the New Age twist that they've added to that to sort of mild it and tune it down a bit.
Yes, indeed. So again, to rewind a little bit, so you rejected religion at quite a young age. What then made you or influenced you to become not adamant's maybe the wrong word, but like it's so interested in atheism and saying I am an atheist? Well, how did that move take place?
So it took me about maybe from 16 and a half to about 18. I got out of Islam. Christianity I read from like way before, because all the material was available to me. It was never convincing for me. So at the age of 19, I've become sort of, you transition into that sort of, maybe there is a God, but it's not the God of the Bible. And I've spent another year or so doing that. And then I got really into philosophy. And this is when I've done my philosophy degree later on, which is nothing to do with my professional career whatsoever. It was more to do, as you know, as a philosopher, it does, you can't get a proper job for that sort of thing. But it's very rewarding. I mean, if time goes back, I'll do it again over and over and over. I'm indebted to philosophy for a lot of things in my life.
Brilliant.
It's brilliant. It's not what people think. It's practical. You can use it practically in everyday situation to assist.
Just sorry to interrupt you, but yeah, like I'm doing a lot on the Ukraine war at the moment, and it's about evaluating sources. It's about not having confirmation bias. It's about all these things, critical thinking in the way that you interpret everything. So yeah, absolutely, it is. Those skills are transferable into real life.
Because people are still attached to the Socratic period of philosophy. They think we were in ivory towers, but the Frankfurt School of Philosophy, philosophy's been brought to earth now. It's used in committees to advise on morality, ethical issues, and in the Teslas of the future. And if it's going to hit somebody, who's it going to hit? And that sort of thing. It's practical. It's very practical now, and you can use it for really critical things. So I'm really indebted for that. But by the age, go ahead.
No, sorry, I thought you didn't know where we were going, but yeah, Karen.
By the age of 19 and a half, I think I'm okay. Well, I raised the white flag. I think I'm an atheist at this point. But I'm young. Okay, I've just realized that there probably is nothing going on, and I've started to enjoy myself, my life. I'm there out dating, traveling the world, getting degrees. Living my youth. And I didn't care about converting. I didn't want to debate it anymore. I sort of lived as a sort of atheist that, if it brought up in a conversation, I'll talk about it, but not a big deal. Probably until the age of about 30. This is where I started to something, the amygdala, they're saying the prefrontal lobe cortex doesn't really mature until you're 25. And from that point, between that 25 and 30, I've started to say, well, it's going to be something more, you're trying to achieve, more stuff in your life. And I wanted to say, well, what can I offer here in the world? I know I've got a good job now. I know I'm earning some good money, but what else can I do? Can I actually help people? And this is where I've done another degree, doing psychology, because again, something that I'll never, I work in supply chain and logistics. There's nothing to do with what apart from the one degree, which is my master degree in business administration. All my other degrees, and my first degree is in linguistics. I can read, write, and speak 7 languages.
Wow, Hanney, you are amazing me. Good, you got more degrees than I've had hot dinners in the last week.
It's I love knowledge.
I'm so it's so important that you chose psychology. So I often talk about when I talk about like philosophy of religion, I stood up before in front of a university hall with like half the audience being the Christian society and half of them being the atheist society, and said, right, I'm going to give you a load of argumentation as to why God doesn't exist, and here it is, and blah 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 blah. And I'm going to give it to you, and I think it's fantastic presentation. But half of you are not going to believe it and not going to change your mind. In fact, there's a very strong chance that you will entrench in your original decision because or worldview and belief, because belief is psychological first and foremost. And then once you've believed something, you then scrabble around and look for argumentation to support that belief. And so therefore, if I need to disabuse you of this notion, in this case that God exists, I need to be employing psychology as much as I am philosophy. And so psychology is so important in understanding why people think and believe what they do. Sorry, carry on.
Oh, I completely agree. I think both together are quite linked. One is sort of probes the world outside of you and ideas, and the other one is relationships and the dynamics between other humans, and together they form a very, very strong hold over your reality. They're very, very important. So I at that sort of age, so by the age of 30, I got into if I can lecture or give some sort of speeches. In obviously this is the era. I'm 50 now, so
wow, you don't look a day over 40.
Thank you very much. So 20 years ago, this is where the internet was about to pick up, kind of thing. It was more to do with like going to churches and mosques and university camps and actually give some sort of speeches here and there, engaging in social activities and trying to sort of debate the subject. So I got really attracted to the debate and conversation about religion, and wanted to see what is the believing mind. Why do people believe? And why they're so attached to believing? Because I've sort of abandoned it at an early stage. And you sit down with a 30, 35 years old person, and they tell you stories that you kind of think, well, this is really, how do you believe such things? And only sort of advance in my career again, lifted for a bit between the age of 30 and 40, again, for traveling the world and got busy. And at the age of 40, I really took a step by, really got serious about engaging conversations and really setting up social events. And I'm part of the Australian Atheist Society here. I sort of give sort of lectures regularly. There's the Existentialist Society in Australia as well. I go there and give them some speeches here and there. I was actually, in November, I'm booked to give a speech on the divine hiddenness situation.
Nice.
And 2 years ago, I thought, you go to these places and you speak to 20 people or 30 people or 40 people in the room, 100 if it's a bigger room. And, YouTube, everybody's on it. And you can suddenly reach thousands of people without having to leave your little studio or study. So this is where it started. And finally, we got to the 10,000 number. Just I think a week ago or so. And congratulations,
Well
Jonathan.
done.
I'm very much more impressed by your channel and its progress in the last few weeks. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's just really taken off. War is bad, apart from for YouTube stats. I mean, there's a philosophical argument to be debate to be had there. But I mean, it's great, but I wish it'd be about philosophy. But there you go.
Those Clubhouse rooms are the ones discussing your books, by the way.
Sorry?
The Clubhouse, yeah. So if you go to the very top ones, it's actually literally in Arabic. It says 30 arguments against the existence of a God.
Oh, mate, I have so much to thank you for.
And I'm going with, so I've had references to your book. Everybody's got your book now, like the link. But also, I'm doing it by chapter. So each, it's going to be 6 parts. I've done 4 so far. And each part of your book is covered by one room. And it's interactive. So I tell them what the drill is, and then I lit rip. So people would have the microphone, and you got people shouting, "Who's that Jonathan? I want to kill him."
Oh, Jesus. You condemned me to death. Well, okay. Well, that's an interesting segue, because I did want to talk to you about the difference in audiences for debating Islamic stuff and Muslims compared to Christians and atheists. So talk to me a little bit about that and the challenges that you might have, but also the successes you have hopefully had.
Well, there is a big difference. I found, because I do speak with Christians as well. Remember, Egypt used to have Christian background before the Arab invasion.
Coptic church.
There's still Coptic, and there's about 15 million Christian Coptic Egyptians live in Egypt at the moment. And it's used to be the head of the Eastern Church, the Orthodox Church in Alexandria. So it has a very vast heritage of Christianity. Saint Mark was the first one to go to Egypt and establish a monastery there. And it's a very, very old established country in terms of Christianity. So I do speak with a lot of Egyptian Christians. Some of the rooms are about, see, I try not to discriminate. When I open my rooms in Clubhouse or I talk about God, I talk about the Abrahamic God, really. And I talk about the evolution of that God. So that Abrahamic God in Judaism, and by the way, Islam and Judaism are a lot closer because of they have a very similar upbringing and very similar source, and the type of people. They're nomadic, they move around, they're not settled in the civilization. That's why Christianity stands out, because it starts from the bosom of a more established sort of society. Remember, it's written in Koine Greek by somebody who's a bit more sophisticated than an Aramaic-speaking peasant. So and the fingerprints of tragedy of Greek tragedies on it, and you can tell it's a little bit more sophisticated, and therefore it's not literal. And because it's not literal, you can actually have a conversation.
Yeah.
With a Christian.
Yeah, and this is exactly so. I've written about this before, and I think this is hugely important, which is the provenance of the Bible compared to the provenance of the Quran. So the Quran is the literal word of God, as transcribed, as dictated by the Archangel Gabriel to the Prophet Muhammad, right? And so that every word is correct, supposedly. Okay. Whereas the Bible is the inspired word of God. So straight away, you've got a massive amount of wriggle room. And then you start seeing the history of interpretation. Now, there is some interpretation in Islam, of course there is, and there are different movements, but there are far fewer. Christianity has 42,000 different denominations, and that's got to tell you something about the provenance of the holy text and how much how much wriggle room there is. So when you've got William Lane Craig making claims in a debate, and then someone challenges on the Old Testament, he holds up Paul Copan and says, go and read this book and blah, 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 but doesn't want to get into the debate about that but that's up for debate. And actually you do need to debate that, but there is so much to be said for interpretation within Christianity that doesn't exist to the same extent in Islam. I hope that's fair.
Oh, absolutely fair, and that's why Christianity came up with theodicies. They wanted to have a conversation, but in the Islamic world, somebody like Farrokh Foda, who had a debate with Al Azhar officials, and he was from the Al Azhar University, which is the biggest Islamic university in the world, in Cairo, Egypt. He lost his life a few months later. He got killed for it. And that's what they are so literal. It's like Christianity in the Middle and Dark Ages right now.
So given that, well, what do you think the way forward is then? I mean, how do you overcome that kind of dogmatism?
Oh, you cannot stop the spirit of time. The whole world is advancing, and only it's a natural selection. Eventually, if you're not equipped with the right tools to adapt to the new world, you're going to lose out. Places like Afghanistan, if they're going to continue doing what they're doing, they're just going to actually self-annihilate. Right now, they've stopped little girls from getting basic education. What do you think when half of your society is no longer producing anything other than babies? Then you eventually you'll run out of things to do and things to use to survive, and eventually you'll vanish. So I think discussions, the newer generation are a lot more open-minded. They're a lot more skeptic, because remember, a Muslim kid right now will have more in common with a European kid than somebody who lived in the 9th century, just by the virtue of living in the same era and sharing the same sort of virtual network of social sources like Facebook and Twitter. And the eyes have been opened. You cannot hide information anymore. Kids want to ask all sort of questions, and the discussions we're running at the moment are eventually going to take their toll.
This is something I've been saying for a long time, which is the way to combat something like a fundamentalist Islam, and the same actually you can say with the more extreme forms of evangelical Christianity, is globalization. Now,
Yes.
I don't want to advocate like this. I don't mean like, well, hey, free market capitalism and stuff like that, but I mean just the idea of like social move, economic move into the future. This kind of globalization that we're seeing is the best thing to try and unseat that kind of fundamentalism. Would you agree? I mean, it seems like that's what you were saying, right?
I would agree, and people misunderstand globalization because they think, like, I've been to places where, like, between Belgium and Holland and Switzerland and Germany, you'll be on a street and you just cross one step and you're in the other country. There are no borders. And then you have somebody like in Russia still fighting over a piece of land. people think globalization, and I love open borders, and the world is so I'd love to see the whole world, and I want it to open up. But they think by doing so you're going to dilute your culture, which is not necessarily true. You can still go from one country to another. The borders are sort of you're free to cross without an issue, and you still can keep your culture and heritage and your distinct cuisine and your dress code and that's what's fascinating about traveling, because you don't want to travel to another UK or another Australia. You want to be culture shocked in a way, in a positive way. You want to go, wow, what is that taste? I've never had anything like this before. Or what is that drink? Or look at that beautiful dress with all these colors, and you want to be, and yet to enter that country, you have the least amount of fuss, and you can enjoy the world, and that's the globalization I'm thinking about.
Yeah, and just the idea that the young people want these things, but these things are kind of taboo in that culture. Then it's that cultural shift towards, the future is about young people. I mean, this is an article I actually wrote back in 2014. But this is exactly that. The provenance between the two books, between the Quran and the Bible, is what underwrites the differences between Christianity and Islam, and how there is that much more wriggle room in Christianity, because it's the inspired word of God and not the actual direct word of God, and everything comes out of that. And I think that so then, Hanney, given that, I see this in terms of evolution, right? And I want to try this out with you. So for me, the success of Christianity is that it is adaptive to the environment. So what happens is when economics start taking off, banking and all this kind of stuff, the Christianity goes, yeah, we can deal with that. We'll adapt to that kind of social move. When homosexuality becomes acceptable, Christianity can adapt to that. There are those who don't, but it can adapt to that, right? So it can mold itself to the environment in the way that we understand in terms of biological evolution, right? What Islam tends to do, in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it demands that the environment adapt to it. So it is unchanging, but in a sense, the advantage is it's purer, as in it doesn't dilute itself. And it's therefore kind of the same thinking as it was, 1,000 years ago, because it's demanding society adapts to it. And you can see this in what's happened in Afghanistan now. It's gone back to the Taliban, which is like, okay, let's retract back to our former kind of evangelical fundamentalist selves, and we're going to demand society now readapts back to this, whereas Christianity adapts to the society. Is that fair?
Yeah, look, Islam commits the fallacy of appealing to antiquity. They think that the glorious past is something to revive and resurrect, because this is when they had the golden age of Islam when it was triumphant. Because the future is quite grim. There isn't really anything for it. So they want to go back to the past. So the conservatives, they think if we abide by the original rules, we get to rule again. And that thinking isn't foreign. There's a lot, even in Christianity at some point.
Well, that's classic conservatism. Yeah,
exactly. And again, there's also appeal to modernity. That's the other fallacy. What you want to do is you're going to assess everything on its own merit. Not every future thing is going to be better than what's happening in the past. It should be on face value, but I still have to probe it, and I still need to understand it. So appealing to anything without understanding and analyzing with the proposition is going to be fallacious both ways. But appealing to a whole generation backward, when we were used to ride camels, we do that. I mean, as born in the 70s, sometimes without realizing, watching Stranger Things, they're appealing to that 80s mood. They go, oh my God, look at that tape. If you give a kid a cassette and a pencil, they wouldn't know what to do these days. And you sort of classic. And we kind of long to that, because remember, we're not longing to anything other than our youth. You want to go back to where you had a full head of hair. You can run forever.
Damn, I do. Don't start this, Hanney. You're making me get angry now. But see, this is why I know that God doesn't exist. Because if God existed, I would still have hair down to here, right? I'd still have my beautiful curly ginger locks, and it was just
You've got the sideburns though.
This is it. I have to overcompensate. So eventually, I'm growing these out, and then I'll just stick them up here, and then job done.
The British. But that's really in a nutshell. But you sort of, and we're very lucky. We're a very lucky generation to have witnessed the old stuff and the new stuff. We've witnessed the cassettes, and now the streaming world, and to be able to go through that. How many generations have gone through these leaps and advances? And I think we're very lucky to have witnessed all of that.
And this is the wonder of the internet, is the ability to be able to have everything at our fingertips. But of course, the flip side of that is the ability to have destructive stuff at our fingertips and be able to post hoc rationalize our incorrect worldview with a bunch of nonsense. So I can believe whatever I want. I can choose to believe whatever I want, and then I can go and find the truth to support that worldview. And that's the challenge the internet faces, and misinformation and disinformation. I mean, this is a battle that we're going through at the moment. Just one thing that I found, going back to the Quran, reading the Quran, and I read the Quran as a whole. I read the whole thing, and I did struggle. I have to say, I struggled. I wanted to be charitable, but I found that as a humanist, as an atheist, it was dehumanizing. Literally, I was reading it, going, "God, these guys really hate me. Like this is, and they want to do me harm." This is quite uncomfortable reading. I don't like certain parts of this. And also, just morally, I just found it quite problematic. And I know it's English translation, but I also found it not very enjoyable to read, actually, just stylistically. But that could be just a language translation.
Thank you for saying that, because one of the challenges of the Quran, and that's what I was trying to tell the Arabic Muslim in particular, because you get Muslims who can't speak Arabic, like the Indonesians and Malaysians.
Yes.
The biggest Muslim country in the world is Indonesia. They can't even, they don't know what they're saying most of the time when they're praying. One of the challenges in the Quran, that apparently the Arabic people used to be quite the poets then. So God came and challenged them in the very thing they're very good at. But there's a problem here. It's not it's the last message to all humanity. And it's written in a certain language that even native Arabic speakers struggle with, because remember, Shakespearean English is not easily understood by a lot of native English speakers right now, and so is even more older versions of English. And we're talking about very, very classical Arabic, and a lot of native Arabic speakers would still need a dictionary reading the Quran and certain words. So to me, to challenge, and as soon as it gets translated, because there's a lot of rhyme, there's a lot of beauty in it, because it's written beautifully in Arabic. But once you translate it, that's gone. And
I really started. I was like, oh god, it was actually a really dry read for me. I didn't enjoy it, and I thought, and I was cognizant that actually this is going to be largely due to the translation, but exactly that. I mean, in Christianity, there's a thing called the problem of particularity. There's a scandal of particularity, which is to say that you can only get to salvation through Jesus. There is only one way to do that, right? And so that's quite difficult when you are attempting for it to be universal, and then you're thinking, well, what about these Amazonian tribes people from 5,000 years ago? Like, how were they able to access salvation if they didn't have access through Jesus? So there's that's a scandal of particularity. But there's the problem of particularity is interesting, which is, I'm writing this book with Dr. Aaron Adair at the moment about aliens and theology, and what would happen if we came across intelligent alien life form, and how would that affect theology and religion. And it's the idea that, well, if you've got this, if Christianity is true, and you've got this very particular thing, you have to get circumcised, and you have to, Judaism, you have to get circumcised, you have to do this, how does that apply to aliens? And then it just looks like it's a really particular thing to this parochial time and place.
You probably have to circumcise a tentacle at that point.
Exactly. And like, well, what is this saying? And all these very particular things that are particular to that time and place, that geography and that history. So in your case, with you were saying with the Quran, is like, it really should be read, and Muslims believe this, it really should be read in Islam, and there's probably good reason for that, but it can't be, and it won't be. Realistically,
and this is when the penny drops, and you say, well, if there is a God, he would not communicate his word in language, in what language whatsoever, because that's going to be an error. So, because it would be understood by certain people in a certain locale at a certain time. And if there is a God, I mean, we always talks about his Lucifer, his Satan. He's given his adversary a way better communication method, which is who can whisper to you in your own slang, in your own tongue. If you're from Yorkshire, if you're from Glasgow, if you're from Edinburgh, it doesn't matter. He will use the idioms. He will use the lingo. If you are in New York, in a Harlem, that Satan has the direct communication to your head and your whatever time, whatever area you live in. God gives himself a way more inferior information of written words frozen in time in a certain way, and it's beyond me.
Yeah, that's a really interesting argument. That's a really interesting point. That I don't think there's any coincidence that you did linguistic psychology and philosophy, by the way, because you've just linked all three of them there.
Didn't realize.
So yeah, there you go. Okay, let's go back to philosophy, or let's go to philosophy of religion. What do you think are the most potent arguments against the existence of God? I guess when you go on your channel, what are the ones that you think, right? I mean, really, this is a humdinger, and these Muslims and Christians should be in trouble over this.
Well, a couple of days ago, we went to chapter 4. So that's your problem of suffering or evil, and the problem of why is God hiding, which is divine hiddenness. So these two. So we've actually argued these two. These are the two strongest at the moment, especially the newer version of the problem of suffering, which is to do with gratuitous suffering and excessive suffering, because there's no way out of that, really. I mean, there is no character building in that. All of that will sort of collapse on its face. Especially, this is the slam dunk one, a God creating sentient beings out of nothingness. We did not demand to be here. We didn't ask to be here. We weren't given a choice to be here. And you're given free will. Apparently, we know for sure that we don't, but let's claim we do. For the test that God is going to put you into to completely fail, and for some strange reason, that most merciful, that's what the Islamic text would say, or the omnibenevolent, to put you in an eternal torture, where the philosophy of punishment is completely ceased to exist, which is rehabilitation or stopping you from doing so again. All of that ceased to exist, because that's the eternal word.
Eternal conscious torment, ECT, is a real problem.
It's pure evil. It's pure evil. There is no way out of that. That is not an evil person who's trying to kill you. That is pure evil, because at some point, after 1 billion years of torture, it must be for its own sake.
Do you find that many Muslims are there? I mean, there obviously will be some, but is eternal conscious torment a really strong belief that is spread throughout Islam?
Oh yeah, and well justified according to them. It's like, you've denied your creator. You've denied the very reason why you're here. It's almost like, I'm here because of him, and that's a wonderful thing. As if they're comparing themselves when they were nothingness and saying, well, you know, when I was nothingness, I was really suffering a lot. I prefer to be here. As if you're there to draw that comparison to start with.
Well, this is an interesting thing, actually. I remember writing an essay on this, or to do with this, back when I was doing my master's, about how people compare non-existence with existence, and you can't do that. It's literally, non-existence has no value. It's not like the value is 0. It has no value. It's lacking a value, and so therefore you cannot say to exist is better than to not exist. You just can't say it. That's like saying an apple is better than a brick. It's like, what does that mean? They're literally non-comparable. So you can't compare non-existence. Yeah, you can't compare non-existence. You can't ascribe any value to non-existence. It literally has no value.
Absolutely. So that to me is a very strong one, and gratuitous suffering and a lot of other things. We said Homo sapiens have been here for around 300,000 years. We're talking about 300 million years of mammalia, and sentient beings feeling things and creating species that feed on the flesh of each other. Well, why is that? What kind of lessons we're going to draw out of that? Human consciousness was not there to sort of witness, and National Geographic wasn't there to understand what the hell's going on. And you add to that, and
in chapter 7 of my book, which we've talked about, is why don't we photosynthesize?
Yeah.
The idea that predation is just really a horrible way for God to design the world. If God really has designed the world, and half the animals had to eat the other half of the animals to merely exist,
yes,
then that's pretty horrible. And then it's not good enough to blame it on humans, the fall, because then you are punishing animals on behalf of what some dude said or did back in the Garden of Eden.
And all the things we're masking, all these biological needs with, like our taste and flavors and spices and cuisines, all of that is in the search for energy. That's what it is. You will die if you have no energy. And it's like sex, you mask it with love. And it kind of exists, and it doesn't exist because it's real.
It's pleasurable. It's pleasurable because if it was pleasurable, then we are more likely to do it. And if we're more likely to do it, we're more likely to have children. If we're more likely to have children, our genes are more likely to. So it's hard baked into existence in the same way that a berry tastes good, because if it didn't taste good, we wouldn't eat it. But then that seed wouldn't get to be spread. No one would eat the seed, and it would drop right next to the tree. And actually, that would compete with itself, with its parent, for resources. So you want to spread seeds as far as possible, so you make them tasty. Blah blah blah. This is evolution.
Even plants do that. Plants that give you pollen and nectars and sweet. They're almost bribing the bees for here's some sugar for you for spreading the good news.
Yeah, that's it. And these are the kind of symbiotic relationships that you would predict on naturalistic evolution. But of course, these things aren't predicted on theistic design and creation. They're just unless that design and creation is identical to naturalistic evolution.
And the last one is the hiding God. I mean, that is the non-resistant non-belief, and so if God reveals himself, everybody's going to be overwhelmed and coerced to believe. No, sir. From your own stories, Adam and Eve were talking directly to God and still chose not to obey God. Satan himself, Lucifer, knew exactly what is going to happen to him, denying the Lord his wishes. Yet he's actually a man of principle. I think Lucifer was, because he according to the Islamic tradition, he refused to kneel in front of humanity. And you think about it, why would you kneel? I mean, you should be kneeling only in front of God, really, if you have to. But why kneel to a newcomer? It makes no sense whatsoever. So refused and said, well, you're proud. You're too proud. But here we go. 2 incidents where God was there and people still, didn't like him. I think if God appeared to us today, we still actually have to think about it. Whether we we will all say, well, he does exist after all, but the worship worthiness, is he worthy of worship? That's a different story altogether.
I asked this question to Rationality Rules, Stephen Woodford, when I interviewed him the other week, which is, what would it take for you to worship God? And I think worship is problematic, just because some necessary entity necessarily exists and necessarily creates you doesn't mean it's not praiseworthy. So in terms of free will, if you argue about free will, it's to do with whether things are praiseworthy or blameworthy. Okay, and of course I deny free will, but therefore in essence I deny praiseworthiness and blameworthiness, which is to say that actually God, even if God did exist, God would not be worthy of praise. God just is, and you'd be like, well,
yeah. Especially when he demands praise, he sort of claims that he doesn't need anything, he's self-sufficient. Yet in the Quran, there's a Quranic verse that says God only created the jinns, those demon-like species, and humanity only for them to worship. So that's a causal relationship between the creation and what he wanted. He's desiring something,
and showing that God has a lack, right?
Absolutely shows has a lack and shows almost a toxic relationship. Like, for example, if we're friends, if we're truly friends, we should just
Well,
really
but we are, Hanney.
we
Jesus.
are indeed. But
Yeah.
you should just enjoy the company of being with somebody you'd actually enjoy conversation with. But imagine if for one of us feeling a little bit superior, so you know what, I'm okay with this relationship, but I want you every now and then just to throw a couple of things that will make me look in front of everybody else. That is a toxic relationship. A proper relationship that is based on, that sort of, it has to be sort of natural, and it's got to be, if you feel the presence of God, and you feel like saying something and it's coming from you, so be it. But for God to demand it, it's going to be a need.
That's a really good point, Hanney. Like, and I guess I've always known this, but haven't so explicitly thought about it. And I've talked about it in terms of like submission. So Islam is submission. So it's all. But actually, in terms of a personal relationship, if you want me to love you, it's an abusive relationship if you are demanding all the time that I praise you, killing me if or doing horrible things if I don't do exactly what you say, trying to bribe me with good stuff if I do what you want me to do, and then bribing me with abuse, eternal abuse, if I don't do what you want to do. That is an absolutely top. If you went into like a domestic abuse center and described the relationship that God expects of us to them, they would say, get her out now.
Absolutely. But because it's attributed to God, then suddenly we suspend our reason. You give this story to somebody, a human, just like I was like, oh, what's wrong with that guy, type of thing. But because it's God, he can do that and get away with it.
Mate, you're a ledge, because quite frankly, I'm writing an article on that. You've just that's my next article, so thank you.
Oh, cool. I look forward to reading
it. Well, it's just, I mean, it's people have done it before. There's nothing new, but I just I really now strongly believe that has all the ingredients of an abusive relationship.
Oh, absolutely. And it will be a very strong article, Jonathan, because people don't make the connections. But once you start embody that sort of example it probably be something that they've gone through themselves, and they go, I couldn't stand that person when I was with them. Yet God is doing the same thing, but for some reason, because I was told that God is good, then therefore that action is good. But it isn't. If God really is in a loving relationship with us, really, if that's the real reason why we're here, hell shouldn't exist. Prayers and time to Muslims pray 5 times a day, 5 times, and it used to be 50. In the ascension of Muhammad to the seventh heaven, and he met Moses, and this is a funny story. He went to God. This is the Burak story where he got on a winged horse, or a mule, actually. People call it mule, and he went to the seventh heaven, and before that, Al-Aqsa Mosque overnight, and he met all the prophets. And when he met God, he told them that Muslims are, from now on, they're going to pray towards the Mecca, not Al-Aqsa. That's the direction, and it's going to be 50 prayers a day. So I say, okay, boss. On the way down, Moses met him. He said, what did God tell you? He said, 50 prayers. Oh, no, go on bargain with him. So he went there and down to 40, 30 until 5.
So do you think, again, this goes back to what we were saying earlier, which is a post hoc rationalization. So they had someone had decided that they needed to pray 50 times a day, right? So then Muhammad goes, well, God, 50 times a day is a right bugger. I've got people that are really moaning about this. No one seems to like it. Maybe if I have a revelation that tells me, and we had this story that he's bargaining it down to 5, it's just a post hoc rationalization.
Or get on their good side, like never happened in the first place. Imagine you're trying to get me to buy you a car, and I'm having an imaginary conversation with a salesperson, and where I invented he told me 50 grand, but I got you 30. And I've never had that conversation. It's like, oh, you're a legend. Thank you very much. Yeah. We never had that conversation in the first place. Muhammad is a super dude. He's a cool dude. Only 5 prayers. It's a piece of cake. Obviously, with the 5 prayers and the rituals where you have to clean up yourself, this can take a significant amount of your time.
Yeah,
But
sure.
God is asking you, it's quite repetitive. You have to recite the same Quranic verses, and it's quite robotic. It's really
Yeah, I mean,
robotic.
and this is where you start getting onto discussions about the place that ritual has in the functional place it has in human life. And there's lots of interesting papers discussing what ritual does for us and how it is, useful or at least functional for some people.
Hmm.
Thank you so much, Idiosyncrasy, a £4 super chat. I really appreciate that. It's very kind of you. So thank you, and thanks for all your support to the channel. Legend. So that's a little a chat about some atheistic arguments, and I'm sure we might mention a couple of others. How about a good argument, or is there such a thing as a good argument for the existence of God, or the best? What do you think is, or maybe the most troubling question for you? I mean, for me, it's always why is there something rather than nothing? But that's
When I speak,
actually
yeah,
irrespective of God.
when I speak to physicists, it depends what you call by nothing. So if it's a philosophical nothing, maybe there's a very, very good reason why it's never existed in the first place. Because remember, if nothing ever existed, then nothing is existence, and therefore it cannot be nothing. The moment you conceive or speak about nothing, it becomes a thing, and therefore,
Yeah, so that's the conceptual understanding of it, but like absent of any like minds to that's just I'm not sure about that. But I get what you're saying.
but it was propped in physics. I mean, that's the thing. It was supported by physics. So I had a conversation with Lawrence Krauss and Michael Shermer, as well as Sean Carroll. And it looks like whenever they empty any space of just whatever, a bit of air from everything, from every particle known to man, it's still there's quantum fields and quantum fluctuations. There is nothing you can do to remove these. What if existence is persistent? It's always been there.
Well, yeah, I mean that's what I would argue is that I would argue that matter is a brute fact in the same way that theists argue God is a brute fact. Essentially, that it's just necessary, and because there's this thing I keep talking about, this Munchausen trilemma. How do you ground anything or explain anything or whatever? There are three ways to explain things: an infinite regress. So what is that? A because of B, because of C, because of D, because of E, on forever. Circle A because of B, because of D, because of A, and then or A because of B, because of C, because of D, just D, just D. That's it. So, and most people seem to intuitively prefer that kind of axiomatic grounding of something. So, we go why this, why that, because God. That's what theists would do, and their axiom is God. And they say, well, God is just a necessary being, and look, it magically explains everything and causally, produces everything. And we as naturalistic, scientific naturalists will say just the universe. That's it. Just a brute fact. Maybe that's necessary.
Yeah.
Either God is necessary or the universe is necessary. Or if you don't like necessary and contingent, it is just a brute fact. Either God is a brute fact or the universe is a brute fact. Go figure.
Yeah. Well, there are lots of physics, and that's why I'm very interested in cosmology and science of the physics at the moment, because it might have lots of answers for us. We're discovering a lot more now about the universe. The fine tuning is an interesting one. There's about 26 cosmological constants, and that if they change by here and there, the universe wouldn't exist. But I'm going to have this conversation with Dr. Richard Carrier, and I'm going to have a conversation with a couple of physicists about that in the next few weeks, because the fine tuning with 26 cosmological constants, and if one of them changes by hair, this will be all null and void. Is an interesting thing to go through. Why is that?
But it's interesting, those kind of arguments, because then what the theists have their cake and eat it too, right? So they say, oh look, we can only just survive because of these constants, and look, the universe is just mainly dead, but look, we're here, we're only just here, therefore God, right? And you say, okay, that's interesting. So if we can only just survive, that proves God exists. Now imagine the universe was teeming with life, and actually the constants were so wide that or any kind of combination of these constants would allow for life. Yet they would use that as evidence for God, because they say, look, it's so easy for life to exist, therefore it's designed for life to exist. And there's life all over the universe. Every planet you look at is teeming with life, therefore God exists. And you're like, hang on, you are taking any amount of evidence here, and you are saying each level of evidence can prove God. That's just
Because God is ill-defined. He's like water. He can fit in any jar you want to put him in. And an ill-defined theory that explains everything usually explains nothing, because it just fits everything. It's not precise. It's like the spirit or the soul. What is that? Well, it's the thing that makes you feel. No, I know what it. It's unfalsifiable. But again, you're right. You're spot on, Jonathan. It's psychology. Some people maybe were not made or created, but sort of evolved with a nervous system, with a certain genetic arrangement, because it's not a single gene. The VMAT2, which is the God gene, the book it's not. We know now, and when it comes to behavior, homosexuality, and things like that, it's never going to be a one gene. It's going to be a spectrum. It's going to be epigenetics. It's going to be lots of other things involved in there. But maybe there are some people who are made, and maybe we need to consider that, because there are huge amount of population, human beings, that only feel balance and a psychological balance when they believe in something. Maybe the idea is not to fight this so much, but maybe remove the teeth and the claws of that particular faith, so we can find a place under the sun together, and still they can keep their, what keeps them anchored.
Well, this is definitely true. So in psychology, it's well known that humans prefer certainty. We're not very good at doing uncertainty. But when you're saying, well, I'm not quite sure, like people who are epistemically humble, like you and me, I assume, where you're like, well, I'm not exactly sure how that works, but I've got good confidence that the naturalism will explain it, because I've got good inductive reason for that. I'm happy to say I don't know. Certain people are not happy to say they don't know, because uncertainty is not good for many humans. They don't like that. And I was talking in the last couple of talks, and Ricky Johnson, who's on the live chat there, I hope he's still there. I interviewed him about the religious denomination he was involved in, Laestadianism, and his son. And it was a great interview. Go and check it out, guys. But I was talking about how some people don't like to think for themselves as well. So, Hanney, this is kind of what you were saying there. There are a certain amount of people who, do you know what? I've worked 60 hours this week. I'm pretty beat. I've had to look after my three kids going mental. I've got a dysfunctional relationship with my partner. Do you know what? When I go into church on Sunday, I just want to be told what to believe. I don't have the time and space and the mental faculties to create my entire worldview from scratch. So if I've got some pastor that stands there on a Sunday morning, tells me what my meaning of and purpose of life is, what my morality should be, and what my knowledge is about how the world is, then brilliant. I'm going to suck that in, take that out, and go out, and that's fine. And actually, that's what I want. I don't want to be a free thinker.
Yeah. Remember, this is the most taxing, this brain here is the most taxing organ in terms of calorie intake and energy intake. So if you can find a package that where you use your calories somewhere else, so go fishing or play football, or and it's almost like cheating a little bit there if you're religious, because I'm gonna have that abundance of energy, because I'm not gonna spend that much calories on thinking, and I'm gonna do my favorite things, and I've got all my existentialist questions sort of answered for me in one lovely package called Christianity, Buddhism, or Islam.
And this is, as Ricky has come on to say, and thanks, Ricky, he's a member of the channel, so I really appreciate that. I feel much happier uncertain, as opposed to being in a dogmatic environment, much happier. And of course, there's lots of things going on there, and we talked about that together, but there are some people that just like to be told what to think. They are followers, not leaders, or they are people that, building up your entire worldview from scratch is, as you say, a really taxing pastime. So,
and that's the majority of the world. And if you look at an actual proportion of numbers of leaders versus, because think about it, if society evolved to have more leaders than followers, then something is going to be wrong. You're going to end up with people probably fights and issues here. But the always the 5-10% ratio that sort of make the changes, lead, and because remember, again, if everybody's a leader, nothing is ever going to get ever done. A leader's not very good at doing things with their hands, and it works magnificently, perfectly for practical reasons. You got your Bs, you've got people that sort of that you're project engineers that will actually design the process, and then people will actually do the bloody thing. But when it comes to belief, it follows, then those leaders are wanting to go, oh, I'm not convinced here. Can you tell me the evidence? While a follower who actually does the work, and a laborer or does the hard work, as you said, they're tired, they're knackered. They just want somebody to say, what are the answers to this? Oh, my kid who died at the age of 2, I'm going to see them back when I go back to heaven. Wonderful. Give me more.
That's the power of the afterlife and that bribery that it gives you. Da Vinci says here, God is the answer to questions we cannot answer ourselves. Yep, absolutely. So when we talk about, why God exists, as far as in our psyches, God is functional. So God does different things for different people. For many people, God is that attribution of explanation to things that you don't understand. The consciousness, why the universe began, all that kind of stuff. Oh, God did it. Yeah, brilliant.
Remember, it's the answer that never really answer anything. It doesn't really give you a proper answer.
Well, yeah. You're answering an unknown with a greater unknown. You say, I don't really understand God, but God answers this thing that I don't understand either. Okay, I'm not sure how that works. Only when we accept the limits of our understanding can we be free of religion. So, and as Ricky says, well said to Da Vinci. That's good stuff. So, speaking of heaven and hell, then, as these ultimate tools of bribery, how do they? And I know you said that Muslims very strongly believe in that. Are there any particular differences between? Well, there are lots of differences between Christians. You get Christian universalists, and you get people that have different understandings of heaven and hell. But are there any meaningful differences between Muslims and Christians?
The Muslim heaven is the most revolting of all of them. Actually, it's actually worse than hell for me. It's horrible. It's horrid. It's the desires and the dreams of a desert dweller. Talks about spilt water. Water is very scarce in the desert, so it talks about glasses or cups of water filled, and you can just carelessly spill them if you want. I mean that's gonna convince you, right? I mean,
I'm always one for. Every time I go to the pub and I see someone drinking a pint, I just want to spill it.
Not mention of carbonated water now. Just that's terrible.
No. Well, so you have this idea of supposedly of 72 virgins, but then there was a guy called Luxembourg, wasn't there, or Luxemburger, who was an academic that had to release pseudonymously, but said that actually that was a mistranslation of a Coptic language. What
they say the raisins instead of.
Yes, it should be grapes instead of virgins, and actually
white raisins. Yeah, it's because this is the reward for when you die in the name of God. So those suicide bombers, imagine being into pieces. It goes to heaven, and God's hand him a plate of 72 raisins. Say, thank you very much.
Really? That's not what I was expecting. There's a court case waiting to happen here.
That would be so funny. It's the ultimate practical joker.
But it shows the importance, right, of translations and doing good exegesis and historical analysis. But the idea of heaven could even just be completely wrong, that most Muslims have, because of a mistranslation.
But there is mention of sex, a lot of sex with a lot of people that you don't know. So it's not your wife. So your wife gets nothing, gets her husband back. But you get a lot of women, and you'd be walking. This is so funny because I was listening to it the other day. You'd be walking down sort of one street in heaven, and there'd be like virgins coming from balconies, coming from palaces, and will call you and say, "Come here." And you go, who are you? So I'm your wife. I'm your wife to be. Come here and get me stud. and so whose house is it? This is your palace. So apparently, it's a lot of, it's an orgy, basically.
Right.
It's an orgy. But rivers of milk, rivers of alcohol that doesn't make you drunk. So, alcohol without the hangover, and milk. Basically the stuff you get from your typical Woolworth supermarket these days.
Yes. Brilliant. So this sounds like some guy has just sat down with his mate, so another couple of blokes down the pub, and it's like, what do you reckon heaven looks like? And they'll be like, I reckon it's like, well, loads of beer, loads of wine, loads of women. Brilliant. It's like two rough blokes down a pub, just like deciding, and then that's now written into Islamic theology. Brilliant.
Even talking about couches, having a couch, because obviously we're talking about tents and dwellers and like rough life. So in neighboring Egypt had beds and couches for like centuries, and these guys are thinking about a couch, a comfy, cushiony couch. That's gonna do it,
So, but is there something to say that this could be just symbolic? That in fact, these are just the things. Yes, they're the things that those people wanted at that time, and that was meaningful for them. But it applies to you. Anyone that reads this, it's whatever you want.
I don't think so, because on the other hand, the description of hell, Dante's Inferno, will have to sit in class and learn from the Muslim description of. We're talking about how horrible infected blood will come out of your mouth and chains put into your bum and out of your mouth. It's graphic stuff. There is no way that's going to be symbolic. It talks about, and this is what Muslim parade about. Oh, God knows science, because in one of the verses God talks about eternal hell, and said every time you die because of the amount of torture, we're going to renew your skin, and therefore so you can feel the torture again. And the Muslim will go, "Oh my God! God knew that the sensation where you feel the nervous areas where you feel the pain is under the skin. Look how wonderful God is. He knew about that." And
I was going to talk to you about this, about how so many Muslims claim that the Quran is just this scientific book, or is this scientifically predictive text. And you're thinking, really? I mean, what are the other common ones?
Well, I've done a full episode with Derek, and I think we're going to do a second part.
For those watching, that's Derek Lambert of Myth Vision, who has another great channel.
Yeah, indeed, and we were debunking the Islamic claims of not really miracles, but scientific science and in pre-scientific history, and it's plagiarized wrong knowledge of the ancient world, like for example, the babies in the womb and how they form, and the stages, and it talks about the bones form first, and then it gets covered by flesh. So you literally a skeleton inside your mom's womb, and then you get covered by flesh.
Yeah.
At the final stage, this is just really weird.
Which is interesting, because if you say, and I referenced a book I'm writing with Dr. Aaron Adair about aliens and theology, and it's the same with biblical cosmology. So the Bible gets the cosmology wrong, just flat out. Right, it's incorrect, right? So if you're an all-knowing God that knows exactly how cosmology works, and your perfect revelation is misinforming people, then that's a bit of a problem. And in the same way here, that if the Quran is supposedly the scientifically predictive text, and it's getting stuff flat out wrong, then that's a problem. It's just like, that is a problem.
And it happens to be the mistake is exactly what the ancient world at that time thought. So the Joshua war, when God is going to hold the sun in place so the day is longer, so Joshua can win the war. I mean, if this was the creator of the universe, he would have held the earth so it won't rotate around itself to create day and night. How do you get around that? He thought, like, back in the day, that the sun goes from east to west. That's the moving. The Earth is probably a flat disk that is sort of fixed, and the sun is moving right to left. And I'm gonna hold the sun so the day is longer, closer to that particular area of the battle. It's insane.
So what? One bugbear I have of the many with Judaism and Christianity or the Bible is slavery. So slavery to me, like, and I've said this. I wrote an article on this. In fact, I'm going to be writing a book on slavery in like 5 books down the line here. But it is a project that's just sort of starting. So the idea is, if the Bible is wrong on slavery, I mean, then it's just, you can just reject the Bible. Just like, I don't want to read that book because it countenances something that's so obviously wrong that if God is countenancing that, then this is broken. There's something wrong. The people in the Bible are broken, morally speaking. God is broken. I am going to reject the Bible on account of slavery alone. I don't need to do all this other exegesis. I don't need to look at the nativity and the resurrection, which I have done, I've written books on, but whatever. I can ditch it on slavery. It fails that bad. What does the Quran say about slavery?
Oh, it's worst version ever. I mean, it's an evolution from the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, you got situations where you're shown how to treat your slave, and beating them up is okay as long as they don't die immediately. But if they die after a couple of days, it's all right.
That's
Jesus,
right.
yeah. Apparently, in Christianity, people think that Jesus never said anything about slavery, but he actually said, that please, slaves, obey your masters, especially of the Christian. It's been, at least it's condoned. It's not abolished. It's not. I mean, I would have liked in the 10 Testament commandments, instead of the first 4 that has nothing to do with morality or anything for humanity whatsoever. Instead of don't make pictures of me, how about I've created you free, so do not enslave each other.
Yeah, I get it. So I said this to you in your video, I think, which is like, literally, Moses should have come down from Mount Sinai, Horeb, with the tablets there, and the first one is number 1, and God made me write this in capitals, right? So I had to carve this in capitals. It says, "Don't do slavery. Just don't do it." Number 2, please read number 1 carefully. Don't do slavery. I'm really, really explicit about this. It's the idea that it's such an obvious thing that God should have said. Some arguments against the Bible aren't about what it does say and the horrible things it does say, but almost what it doesn't say. And here it doesn't say things that should be very obviously and explicitly said, because the Bible was used for 2,000 years to countenance and justify slavery. So the slave traders were Christian predominantly in the last 1,000 years.
Especially when the context of the circumstance of Exodus is about freeing his people from slavery. Like he's okay with it temporarily, and then as soon as they're out, say, "Oh, by the way, you can start do some slavery."
Exactly. So you get liberation theologians that say, "Oh, the Exodus account is a great argument against slavery," and because these are the Hebrews are breaking their bondage, they're breaking their bonds and escaping from this horrible slavery under the Egyptians. And so, okay, that's one wonderful story. Yeah, wonderful. Oh, apart from all the Egyptian children getting killed because Pharaoh's heart was hardened and he said no. But let's just forget that, and all the cattle and all the horrible 10 plagues. Let's forget that. Just forget that. But yeah, great story about getting released from bondage and escaping. What happens next? Because this is great. I like the story. So how does the story end? Oh no, you don't want to. No, seriously, how does the story end? No. Oh, it turns out that those people that escaped from slavery go into Canaan and enslave the Canaanites. And everyone they defeat in battle, God countenances them to take them as slaves, and sexual slaves as well. Okay, right. So this isn't liberation theology. This is actually enslavement theology.
Yeah, using a directive as well. Yeah, a directive. Like they have been issued a directive by the boss. You can do that. Here's a license, and keep the versions for yourself again. And that's something again the Muslims are very good at. They raided neighboring villages, and in the Quran it says God and the Prophet get 20% of the booty. It's actually written there. 1/5. Yeah. So what kind of God is that? This is and the women are usually taken as slaves. There is a very, very famous massacre called Bani Qurayza massacre, where Muhammad went to a neighboring village that was dwelled by Jews and slaughtered 900 of them. And he used to get the kids, the boys, and they would reveal their genitals, and anybody who's the hair started to grow and was showing a little bit of maturity, they get slaughtered. So you could be 11, a little bit young, and you slaughter because you're considered to be a man. And all of that done, all the men and all the women are taken as concubines. In that very same incident, the most beautiful woman who was married to a noble person, Safiya, he actually got her and had sex with her on the way back on a camel or something. I couldn't even wait.
Yeah.
So this is. We're talking horrible stuff here.
Yeah, and in fact, Da Vinci said the slaves in Suriname were handed a redacted Bible. Interestingly, the slaves in the antebellum South were given redacted Bibles that were cherry picking stuff that kind of justified their slavery, and any kind of stuff to do with liberation. Yeah, not so much. Thank you so much, Holy Humanist, Nuraya Khan. I love your work and how you guys make my brain hurt. Oh, that's nice. Thank you. Brain hurting is good. Although some people don't like their brain hurting and they just sit in church and take it all in, or a mosque. We talked about that. Anyway, Hanney, great to see you here. Love that you bring these conversations to the Arabic speaking world. So, okay, as we sort of move to a close, Hanney, and thank you, by the way, thank you so much, Nuraya. That's really very generous of you. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Nori is a good friend of mine as well, and she does a great job. I mean, she's a very outspoken, female in a place where it's very, very difficult to do such things. She's a very brave and intelligent lady.
Excellent, brilliant. Well, that nice of you to say that. I'm sure that excellent. So, talk to me a little bit about the reception you've had with your Arabic videos, and is there any evidence that you've changed anyone's mind? Because sometimes with the channels like this, there's the element of preaching to the converted. Although I do have some members, Chindi Chimbalu is a lovely member who's a progressive Christian, and he bought my book, in fact, and he struggles. In fact, he's a Christian universalist because he struggles with these ideas of heaven and hell and things like that. So, we can touch people in certain ways, but sometimes I feel that obviously more often than not, we are preaching to the converted. What's your experience of actually affecting people?
I got to know for sure the answer to that about 6 months ago. Remember when I told you I was going to stop my Arabic broadcasting because I had enough and people weren't, sort of, I didn't think, maybe I was suspicious that nobody was really changing, or, I was just wasting my time here. But as soon as I start saying, look, I'm going to stop my Arabic broadcasting and I'm going to do English one instead, the amount of messages, the silent viewers, and there are a lot of them that have people will say, "Oh, you've changed everything. I've now left religion, but I can't speak about it. I've been like a closet atheist for a year now. I'm waiting to travel to a different country. I'm now an independent thinker. Please do not stop." I've got so many messages that I had to reverse my decision and continue. And people are becoming a lot more vocal now, and there's a lot of more brave people on Clubhouse. That application is very interesting. It gives you a reflection. There are rooms for atheist Arabs with hundreds of people that chat and discuss all sort of things: problem of evil, the Quranic verses, all sort of things, Bible, Christians as well. There are a lot of Christian Arabs in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Egypt, and beyond. So you can't really stop.
I'd love to know the true number of non-believers in both in places like Afghanistan, that are very different countries demographically speaking to someone like, I don't know, Jordan or somewhere like that. I just, we're never going to know really, but yeah.
But I'll give you a number.
Is helping.
I'd love to know the number even in the Western world, because we had a census in Australia in 2019. And 29% of the Australian population identified with irreligious. This year we've done another one, and it's gone up to, I think it's a 42%. 42% of Australia. And that's not taken in consideration those who would fill the sense of saying they're Christian, but they're not practicing Christian.
Yeah, so there's been a campaign in Australia for quite a long time now, last sort of 5 to 10 years, saying please be accurate with what you put on the Australian census, because people are putting Christian when they're not really Christian, and it's the same in the UK. But the British Attitude Survey, I think the last one's 52% non-religious here. I mean, we are pretty apathetic. Even when we are religious, we're a bit like, you know.
Yeah. It's just the Christmas and the lovely stuff, which we all enjoy. I still enjoy Christmas. I still enjoy.
Absolutely.
I like festivities. If there's booze and if there is food and the gathering and people are happy. Literally, if I see people happy, I'm happy for them.
Yeah.
If they gather around in the families, I'm happy.
Absolutely. So that's really fantastic. If you have any super chats or any questions last minute, please get them in now. If you want to say anything to Hanney or ask him any questions, please get them in now. But so that's really positive that your channel. Sorry, I put it up before, but I didn't actually have your channel up, but now it is there. That your channel is making that difference, and you say you use another app, so those stats aren't even reflected in the going on in the app. Is that correct?
It's on the app, but after doing it on the app, I've actually uploaded them into the YouTube channel. So anything without, with those white banners, it says Clubhouse. These are just the audio recording of these rooms. They are chat rooms. And the interesting thing is they have people. So you open a room and you're a moderator and you might have 2 or 3 and you can allow guests to come in and they will tell you the piece. And these are regular people. They are not philosophically trained. They're not theologically trained. You get to hear it from the horse's mouth of religious people. What's their experience? And people talk about healing miracles and people telling you about losing faith. There are the true stories of people and their stories with faith. They're very interesting.
This comment is exactly that. Conversations, thank you, Skyworks 600. I like this statement. Conversations break the misconceptions of superstition. And quite often people are afraid or have never even thought. I remember, speaking to Ricky Johnson, in fact, is an example, but this is quite a common thing. Which are people that are born and brought up in these I don't want to say cult, because it's a bit pejorative, but in these really deeply religious contexts, often just don't know of or have no experience of questioning beyond this little world. And if they do have these little doubts, they either compartmentalize them or smother them, or they're left thinking about them on their own in bed at night, and not expressing them to anyone else. So the ability to have these conversations is the most crucial part of the movement towards becoming non-religious. You can't become non-religious if you don't have these conversations. So it's having these conversations. Absolutely.
And sometimes you think you're on your own and you better shut up because nobody will understand you. And suddenly you start speaking and there are like hundreds like you and you go, oh, and you sort of draw courage from that and you start speaking out. But remember, we are a younger generation now. There are centuries and centuries of generations of people who lived within religious beliefs. Everybody was religious back in antiquity for one reason or another. Probably if I was born in the 9th century, most probably I would have believed in something. It's a superstitious world. A lot of questions that we've answered now, we're not answer them. I might have maybe religious with a twist, but you're still kind of religious. And I don't. That's why I don't blame people from the past who believed in things because they were afraid. There were volcanoes that they don't understand. There is torrential rain. They're afraid. So I can't really be too judgmental. But we are heading towards an age where a lot of that God of the gap is shrinking, getting very, very, very small, getting very small. So I'm not going to judge the past. The past, it's got its own circumstances. But right now, if people are turning up and saying the theory of evolution is just a theory, we didn't come from, Darwin said we came from monkeys, and I don't believe in it. There's no excuse because you can find out for yourself for sure right now. that this is not right.
Yeah. It's just a complete misinterpretation and misinformed opinion of what that is. I mean, talk about science and being born 900 years ago or something. Of course, pretty much everyone was Christian, say in Europe. We're talking about Europe. And you get these ideas that, oh, Christianity is responsible for the development of science. No, humans are responsible for the development of science, and a lot of them happen to be Christian at the time. In societies where these kind of things were it was fertile ground for that. It's not fertile ground because of Christianity. It's fertile ground because of society and humanity. That look, you look at what's happened to science since the Enlightenment. And tell me that, and sing the praises of Christianity. It's just, it's humans. But the flip side, people often say, oh, religion is responsible for all the wars. No, actually humans are responsible for all the wars.
Agreed.
And they might slap the label of religion on there. You look at Northern Ireland, Catholic, Protestant. Yeah, that's just tribalism. It could be anything. We are just deeply tribalistic. So I will attack religious people for saying that about science, but I will also defend religion in terms of it's not religion that causes wars. Often it's religion that, well, sometimes it can facilitate them with labels and tribalism, but really it's humans do pretty shitty things quite often.
Yeah, it's not religion. Religion has come about because of dogma. If you have a group of people that find it easy to find to be appealed to package ideas because it's a less effort, and therefore dogma is dominant because you give them set of ideas and they follow. That is the main reason. Nationalism. I mean, there are lots of things that you think isn't. I mean, this is. I mean, can you even control where you're born? Why would you be proud of something? We're proud of it because this is how you sort of make sense of things.
Yeah.
But how can you be proud of an accident? Really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's an accident where we're born.
Yeah, exactly. We've got someone in the thread who's been pretty interesting throughout the conversation. But he's saying, but China's atheist, North Korea is atheist. China, which at 14% has the lowest percentage affirming the need for belief in God of any country surveyed, and the inference is that those countries are bad, and there's so many problems with that kind of thinking that it annoys me. Do you have anything to say to that while I look for one of my old articles?
I remember, I'm going to quote him, Christopher Hitchens. Christopher Hitchens said once before that North Korea is the most religious country in the world. All what they've done is they've removed the God, and used the incredulity of the people and the reservoir of enslavement to replace God, the Christian God, with a human being, with a person. And he said the Father and the Son, they're just one short of a Trinity in North Korea. Yeah. I remember him saying it was funny, but it's a religious country. Atheism is just a rejection of a God. Is what also you do. The human rights, the scientific method. There's so many things that you got to follow through.
Yeah, and this is where you've got to be more nuanced. You've got to think, okay, what's operating here? Is this a really strong sense of authoritarianism? Is it totalitarian authoritarianism that's really working here, or is it the fact that they are atheists? Because I'm an atheist, but it doesn't make me want to go out and kill people, right? So it's not the atheism that's doing the work there. And this is what annoys me about really simplistic. And I will say this is simplistic. So what Crackshot 322 is saying here is deeply simplistic. You've got to think, what are the things with causal efficacy that are at play here? Because I'm atheist, you're atheist, and we don't go out murdering people. So it takes a lot more than that in order to do that. In the same way, I'm defending Christians. Like, the Catholicism supposedly or the religiosity of Hitler, okay, and the people will debate this, but to different degrees he was religious. But I don't think he went out and did that because he was religious, right? Mm-hmm. In the same way that we could look at lots of people who've done horrible things. I don't think they're doing them because they are religious. Many times, it's because they are broken human beings. So here, for example, this is an article I wrote. Oh, sorry, I keep doing that. I wrote a long time ago. A great myth about atheism: Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot equals atheism equals atrocity equals atrocity. And this is my redux argument. So if you want to check that out, that is to basically take on the point that this crackshot guy is saying. And taking it to task and saying, look, it's just simplistic. It's not good enough. And that is a big old article. That's a big old article to support my contention there, and yours as well, I presume, Hanney.
I was going to say, interesting Freudian slip there.
That was entirely intentional. I've put that in the live chat, but there you go. You can check that out. I will defend religion when I think it's unfairly maligned, and I will defend atheism when I think it's unfairly maligned. I'm seeking after truth. Anyway, sorry, that's a lot of me talking, Hanney, and it's your interview. So look, let's do my quick fire questions, and then I'll let you go to bed. Quick fire questions. So these are ones I do with interviews like this. So you can't think too much about this. What's your favorite movie?
Oh, Jesus, that's the difficult one. Mother.
Yeah, you mentioned this, and I must watch this. So this is a film with Nicole Kidman that's actually an allegory of a religious story of the creation myth. Is that right?
Jennifer Lawrence.
Oh, it's Jennifer Lawrence. Sorry.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I must watch that. Okay. Nice one. Favorite TV series?
The Office by Ricky Gervais.
Oh, Ricky Gervais. Interesting.
The original.
Yes, absolutely. I love the Christmas special. That's a classic of TV. Okay. Favorite non-fiction book?
Origin Species.
The Origins. Oh, wow. Goodness me. Hardcore. Okay. Favorite fiction book? I don't know if you have time to read anymore.
Hitchhiker.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Douglas Adams. Excellent. Okay. If you had a superhero ability, what would it be?
It's behind me. Superman.
Yeah. So the ability to fly and strength and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, he's an allegory for Jesus, by the way. Superman.
Oh, there you go. You learn something every day. Every day's a school day. Thanks, Hanney.
When you speak with Robert Price, he'll tell you, because there's the story about him at the age of 30, the father. There's so many allegory about the story of Jesus and Superman.
Interesting.
Adopted parents. His parents are not his real parents. He's not going to be understood by this world, and there's so many allegory there.
If you were God, think what change would you make to the world?
If I'm God, I would have not created at all.
Oh, that's a debate in that, but we haven't got time. Nice, I love it. Last Supper, you're just about to get executed for your heathen activities, so you are granted a final meal. What would that final meal be?
Well, turning into being a vegetarian now. It's probably a vegetarian pizza.
Vegetarian pizza, nice, good bit of pizza. Here's my connection. I told you this before. When I was in Melbourne in 1996, backpacking around Australia, I worked in a pizza restaurant in, what's that? Fitzpatrick Street? No, there's something street with all the restaurants. Anyway, I worked in a wood-fired pizza restaurant there.
Fitzroy.
Is it Fitzroy? Is that not Fitzroy the place, but there's a street.
Okay.
That goes up, and it had all these restaurants and cool little places. And anyway, I worked in a restaurant there. It's not very interesting, but I loved Melbourne. Melbourne was awesome. Okay. This final question for you. You are just about to get your face eaten off by a horde of zombies. They are indeed the same zombies that are in a pandemic as this is Spam O'Clock, as detailed in my fiction series, Survival of the Fittest, Metamorphosis and Adaptation. It's an ongoing series I'm writing. Please, available at all good bookstores. Anyway, you're just about to get your face eaten off. You have time to get down to your pre-prepped bunker where you can hang out for a month. You can take 3 people with you. They can't be your friends or family. They can be dead or alive, or fictional. Which three people would you spend a month in a bunker with?
Christopher Hitchens, Ricky Gervais, and Charlie Chaplin.
What? Okay, well, explain that last one a little bit.
I've always been fascinated by Charlie Chaplin. I think he's a pioneer, and some of his movies, the way he can express a full story just using some impressions and movement of the body, and they're quite deep. They're not just funny. Some of them are quite interesting, intricate stories. Would make that sort of period of time quite interesting.
It'd be quite quiet though, like that month, where he'd just be like.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I think because Ricky Gervais doesn't stop talking and the giggle and the high-pitched giggle. I think when we're all tired of that too much hyper activity by Ricky Gervais, Charlie Chaplin will take over.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, look, Hanney, thank you so much for your time. Please, by the way, everyone, as Idiosyncrasy says, remember to like and subscribe and do all those things that YouTube people say and do and viewers do.
I always forget. I never do.
And thank you so much to Idiosyncrasy and Nuria for, or Nuria, sorry if I've mispronounced your name, but thank you for your super chats. Really, really generous. Thank you for coming on this show, Hanney. I really appreciate obviously the work you're doing. I appreciate the time we spent together on your channel talking about this book and what you're doing in those chat rooms, and that's absolutely in Clubhouse fascinating. I didn't know you were doing that, and that's really interesting. I'd love to find out what people think about the book, not through any vanity's sake, but just to see if those arguments hold up. To see whether they have effect on people. But yeah, so let me know. But I really appreciate your time being here.
One piece of information, all our chats in my channel, they have within 24 hours Arabic subtitles to them. So every conversation we had have Arabic subtitles so they can actually understand firsthand the conversation we're having.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, wow. That's really effective. And it's important. Like, you don't realize how important little things like that on videos are. So I've been going through all the many thread comments on my Ukraine war chats, and people saying, oh, it's really helpful you put chapters in, it allows me to do this, really helpful you do this. And people, those kind of little things are meaningful for people to enable them to interact much more successfully with your content. So that's interesting, and that's great.
I'll show you a way, because this is an automatic subtitle provided by YouTube. There is a setting in your channel that you can have. So you will, whatever conversation you can have, it will be subtitled into Russian, Ukrainian, English, Spanish, so you can reach wider audience. They're available by just a quick, easy configuration into your YouTube channel, and they're there automatically.
Job done. Revolutionary. Well, look, Hanney, I've really enjoyed the time we've had together. What are your last words to the world? Not that you're going to die, but you're just going to go to bed.
Jonathan, I met you about 2 or 3 months ago now. We've started our series, and I think I've seen you on Derek. And since then, I think we developed a really good friendship here. I'm very, very honored to know you. You're somebody that I really enjoy speaking with. We're very similar in so many different ways, and so genuine about everything about you and your approach. And I can't wait to have more of that brain of yours over the next years to come, discussing difficult things to navigate this strange existence.
Wonderful. Oh, that's really, I just got shivered down my spine. Thank you so much for saying so. And right back at you. Really enjoyed the time that we spent together. And I can't wait to continue collaborations and just congratulations for the work you're doing, particularly in the Arabic world, which is so desperately, needed, that free thought to be expressed in every context and every place in the world. So thanks for your work, mate. In the meantime, everyone, I hope you've enjoyed this. Please put your comments below. And I guess, I'll see you soon, and we'll have another conversation or live at some point. But in the meantime, I will continue to put out philosophical pieces and philosophy of religion pieces, and obviously do my Ukraine war update daily videos, which seem to be taking off. So if you want to check them out, please do as well. In the meantime, question everything, particularly yourselves. You are the easiest person to fool. So there you go. Thanks, Hanney, and thanks, everybody.